I'll entertain a motion to, because they have to be separate ones.
Mr. Chair, I move that we accept the minutes from the September 10th Planning Commission meeting.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Mr. Chair, I also move that we accept the minutes from the September 28th Planning Commission meeting.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Brian, is there any new business?
No, there is not.
So we're going to jump right into it.
I might make a suggestion tonight, if the audience is willing, is give your script one time, and then you can ask for conflicts of interest or ex parte for each one, but
Okay.
skip the rest of it.
That is in the interest of saving time and getting us all to bed at an early hour. That is a fantastic suggestion. Okay, so we've got 4 items on the public hearing. The first one is we are going to consider a request from the Swelland family for an annexation and zoning map amendment to annex 4.84 acres consisting of 1 tax lot, excuse me, and adjacent right-of-way on North Redwood Street located within the North Redwood Development Concept Plan, and to rezone from County RR FF-5 to R1 Low Density Residential. That's ANN 18-04/ZC 18-05 Swelland. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And as Brian suggested, I'm going to read the script once and then come back because we have a lot to go over. So the matter presently before the hearing body requires a public hearing. All interested persons in attendance shall be heard on the matter. If you wish to testify on this matter, please fill out the public testimony card and give it to the recording secretary. It looks like this. At the appropriate time when your name is called, please step forward to the microphone, state your name, address, and interest in the matter. For longer presentations, proponents and opponents may buy time from one another. In so doing, those either in favor or opposed may allocate their time to a spokesperson who will represent the entire group. You may be limited by time for your presentation. Generally, the applicant will have a total of 15 minutes to speak. The proponents will be given 5 minutes each, the opponents will be given 5 minutes each, and those thought to be neutral on the matter will be given 5 minutes each. The applicant will then have 10 minutes for rebuttal. All questions must be directed through the chair. Any evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access and to become a part of the record. All written testimony received both for and against prior to the hearing shall be summarized by staff and presented briefly to the hearing body during the staff report. Testimony and evidence must be directed toward the applicable review criteria contained as indicated in the staff report, the comprehensive plan, or the applicable land use regulations which the person believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue may preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government to respond to the issue may preclude an action for damages in circuit court. Everyone present is encouraged to testify, even if it is only to concur with previous testimony. At this time, I would ask that any member of the hearing body who has a conflict of interest to please indicate the nature and extent of the conflict and whether you intend to participate in or abstain from hearing the present matter. Okay. Also, if any member of the hearing body has had any ex parte contact with anyone prior to this hearing, including a visit to the site, please declare the nature and extent of such contact at this time. Okay. Does any member of the audience have any questions for any commissioner regarding conflict of interest or ex parte contact? Okay. The public hearing will be conducted as follows. First, Brian will give a staff report, then we will ask questions, and then we will open the hearing for public testimony. The applicant will lead and have not more than 15 minutes. The proponents will have not more than 5 minutes each. The opponents not more than 5 minutes each. And neutral will not have more than 5 minutes each. Rebuttal by the applicant, not more than 10 minutes. That time I'll close the public testimony. Have questions, if any. We will discuss and deliberate. There will be no additional testimony unless specifically allowed by the chair. The decision shall be made by the hearing body at the close of the hearing, or the matter will be continued to a date certain in the future. This will be the only notice of that date you will receive. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. Brian.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening. This is a annexation and associated rezoning request. It's on a tax lot that is owned by several members of the Swellen family, and it's a total of 5.03 acres to be annexed, including a portion of the adjacent right-of-way for North Redwood Street. The review criteria is shown on the screen here that we use for annexations. We have 16.84 of our, which is our annexation ordinance within the development code. And then the associated 16.54, which is amendments to our zoning map. And those criteria are very similar between those two sections of the code. We also indicate the review criteria for these kinds of applications, which are in 16.89. And then the associated zoning change is to the R1.5 medium density residential zone. So that's part of the review criteria as well. We always make mention back to the comprehensive plan if there's any related policies that might be applicable for any possible guidance and review of things. There's also state statute that talks about boundary changes when you're doing annexations. And then our urban growth management agreement with the county, since we're talking about county property coming into the city limits. In the hatched area on this slide, it's showing the tax lot that's referred to as that 5.03 acres for annexation. This particular property is located in an area designated by the comprehensive plan as medium density residential. Therefore, a rezoning in conformance with the comprehensive plan land use designation would be the R1.5 medium density zoning district. And so that is what is requested. There'll be no need for any comp plan amendment, anything like that. And any annexation in this particular area is subject to the previously approved development concept plan. We call it the North Redwood Development Concept Plan. And so the applicant did not need to prepare that since it's already been adopted and includes this particular property. The applicant, part of their submittal was portions of that North Redwood concept plan. You may have seen that in the packet if you needed to review it and refresh your memory about all of the work that went into developing and adopting that concept plan for the area. This is just an assessor's map with the star pointing out. This is part of the Canby Gardens original platted area, and it's on the east side of North Redwood. It's between 12th and 13th Avenue on that east side. So here's a copy of the development concept plan that's been approved for the area. And so if you see the blue star on the map, that's the property that's being proposed for annexation. And basically what this generally does is it's showing you the light yellow, medium yellow, and kind of orangish color down at the very bottom, showing you the different residential zoning, underlying zoning districts that were applicable to this concept planning area, and that this falls in that medium density residential area. And it also shows you, readily shows you the street circulation pattern that was outlined and adopted in the concept plan. I think all of you were here when we did a previous subdivision approval up on the further to the north, and that outer circulation, I don't know if I can show that on here or not, this outer inner circulation route was actually changed up here on the north and ended up stopping right here and heading west over to North Redwood. We still have two streets heading up this direction, but this street was changed. So modifications, even during the subdivision process, were approved through the Planning Commission and the City Council in that case. And so there are changes that can be made to the concept plan, either formally or through the review process, if felt to be suitable. In this particular case, I was kind of mentioning the fact that this applicant has indicated that they don't plan to develop the property. This will give them the opportunity to sell the property, and it may be bought by someone that would like to develop it. If so, it'll already be annexed and ready for that next step. And so I think they think it'll improve the sellability of the property by getting it annexed. They actually did do a layout because they felt like it was a requirement. We advised them not to share that layout with you because it actually had some issues in terms of conformance with this adopted concept plan. We said, since you're not developing it, why don't you just wait until someone does buy the property and let them work out the actual layout of how the streets and the utilities and such are going to work, since they didn't have the expertise to do all of that particular work, since they're not developing the property. So we had two submittals with public comments, and I'm not 100% chance, but I don't think these were in your packet, so I was going to review them really quick. One of them was from Rebecca Baker. She lives at 1562 North Juniper Place. And she said that they've lived there since 2007. One of the reasons they loved the home site was their view across Territorial, where they, whoops, that isn't even the right one. That isn't even on any of them on this case, is it? Okay, let's try this one. This one says they have no objections for the annexation and the zone change. And this was from Dwayne Zacher, and so that's not too many comments. In review of this particular one, the review criteria for an annexation, probably the one we've been focusing on most with several annexations we've had recently, is the second criteria that talks about a need for more land to be annexed into the city. And that's where we bring up a criteria within the code that talks about having a minimum 3-year supply of land is determined to be adequate. Doesn't mean we can't have more, but that's a goal. And so whenever we have less than that, it should be an automatic consideration that if all the other criteria are met, that you should approve the annexation. What we have found out in the last 2 annexations we've had from fairly extensive analysis supplied with those is that we're getting very near that 3-year supply. And that's defined and has been defined through those previous analysis by all of the approved subdivisions that we have now done in the past 2 or 3 years. If every one of those were fully developed, all the infrastructure put in, then the plat allowed to be filed of record in the courthouse, we would then have platted lots available for sale and building of homes. If that occurred on every one of those subdivisions, then we're nearing a point that in probably not until 2020, the first of the year of 2020, we would have a 3-year supply of platted lots available to build homes on, if all of those developed in the next 1 or 2 years. That may be unrealistic, that all of the infrastructure to allow them to file the plats of record and then to have those homes built to accommodate, new population moving into the town, which is one of the criteria that you relate to that land needs, is there a demand? Will they all be built and sold and occupied basically within that time frame? But the main point is that we are at a point where considering that criteria could become very important in terms of if you have a concern about too much property being annexed all at one time. It's a metering type effect. That review criteria gives the city an opportunity, if there's some other criteria that seems to be of some potential concern, that you can use that as a metering valve to slow down annexation so that we maintain no more, if that's what you think is important, than a 3-year land supply. Staff has placed in the reports and a couple of the previous ones that under the current circumstances, it appears that any lot that's platted and a home is being built on very quickly after they're platted, and every home is selling as fast as the homes are built. So that means that 3 years land supply isn't going to last very long if the current economy continues. We may have that one point where we have 3 years worth of lots in January of 2020, but if this same economy stays, it's slowly going, well, not slowly, but quickly going to reduce to less than a 3-year supply again. There's nothing that says we can't have more than a 3-year supply. One of the more recent annexations we had was for the North Pine, and in that particular one, the commission and the city council had no hesitancy, and the same thing applied to that one that I'm saying now. That's completely surrounded by existing city limits. The current property owners there were getting all the benefits of living in the city, yet they were never in the city. And so it was a logical place where we had full capacity to serve the property with all necessary utilities. Everybody that left the property uses our city streets, et cetera. By being surrounded by the current city, it provided an opportunity for actually improving the adjacent streets that people complain about not being up to par. And that's really pretty similar to this particular property as well. The property directly to the north isn't currently in the city limits, nor the one directly to the south. They're all part of the North Redwood concept plan and could readily be coming in the next couple of years as well, just depending on the property owner's desires. So I thought I'd mention that particular. Otherwise, we've indicated in the staff report all the other review criteria, just as I said, are fully met, that we fully have all necessary utilities, can be extended to the site. The developer is always responsible for doing those. The concept plan said how it should be done in the most efficient manner. And so there's no capacity issues with our water or sewer services to be able to handle or treat the effluent from a development that would occur on this particular property. So with that in mind, staff has actually recommended approval of this annexation and related zone change. And as we mentioned, upon approval, it would be designated as R1.5 zoning on the property. Are there any questions?
Okay, then can we hear from the owner? State your name and address, that'd be great.
My name is Brian Swelland, and I currently live at 14675 Cassell Court in Aurora. My wife, Lisa, is here, as well as my sister-in-law, Cindy, who still resides at the current property address of 1268 North Redwood Street. And we, of course, are here to propose the annexation of our property into the city of Canby and rezone from rural to 1.5.
Yeah. Is that all you have to say?
That's pretty much it.
You got lots of time.
I know I do. I don't think I can fill 15 minutes, though.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Any questions?
Nope.
Thank you very much. Are there any other proponents that would like to speak in favor of this issue? Okay. Yeah? You're going to speak in favor, right?
In favor, yes. I'm Breckenridge Cartwright, and I'm the attorney for Mr. Swelland's deceased brother, who is also, attorney for Mr. Swelland's deceased brother, who is also still entitled to this property, and speaking in favor on behalf of his wife, Cindy, who's here today. And just to essentially reiterate what you have already stated, which is that this piece of property is within the urban growth boundary. It meets all of the criteria. We haven't requested any change in the comprehensive plan, so it will meet up, as proposed, perfectly with the North Redwood area comprehensive plan that's already been developed. You've mentioned all the other criteria of concern seem to be met. The only question is possibly, as was brought up, was the minimum 3-year supply. And as was previously stated, all of the currently developed plots in Canby have been purchased quite quickly. And as you saw from the map, the area is completely perfect for development, given that it's surrounded by high density development next to it, or higher density development next to it, and is bounded by the city on most of its sides, other than that small strip that was in the darkest orange that he demonstrated on the map. So just to lay those out, that we don't believe that the 3-year supply will be any problem for this piece of property. Thank you so much.
Any questions? Thank you very much. Any other proponents, people that would like to speak in favor of this project? Okay, I have Mr. Bob Cambra, is that correct? Yeah, that you would like to speak on this matter.
Yes, thank you. My name is Bob Cambra. I live at 1338 North Maple here in Canby. I'm here opposing this annexation basically because I feel that the Redwood Road is not adequate to sustain this type of development. I've said this before at the prior other annexation and development, that presently Redwood is a substandard road for its usage and its projected usage. I think that despite the study that was done that I believe is flawed, once those developments are fully implemented, you'll have a backlog on Territorial and Redwood. You'll have a problem on Territorial at 99 and Redwood that you won't be able to rectify because the present roadway is only a 2-lane roadway, and you will not be able to create any additional outlets or even turning lanes within that Redwood stretch. You can only imagine the backup of cars trying to get out of their developments onto Redwood, and people trying to turn from Redwood into those developments with the heavy traffic that currently uses Redwood as a main link from Fred Meyers and Saratoga all the way across to Territorial and going backwards. I think we're ignoring this problem, and it's going to come back to bite us because we haven't done anything to address it. We don't even identify this possibility as a mitigating problem that needs to be dealt with. I'm befuddled by that whole matter. I believe you have a comment form from a Mr. Eugene Jadowski, who spells it out very well, and I ask you to review that in your considerations. Thank you.
Any questions? No. Thank you. I think that I have Kathy Pauley, is that correct?
Yes, but I was here to speak on the other 3 issues.
The other 3 issues, I'm sorry. Okay. So Bob, I have two slips here from you. One is the other one for, oh, okay, I'm sorry. I see where you jotted that down. Okay, is there anybody else that would like to speak in opposition? Is there anybody that is neutral on the matter but still would like to say a few words? Okay. So, any rebuttal? Okay, come forward, state your name and address, please. You have 10 minutes.
Okay, good evening. My name is Lisa Swelland, and I put together this packet for you, all the applications. And I did want to talk about the traffic analysis that we did pay for. We paid for it was a smaller traffic analysis. Apparently it's called it was dated April 2nd, 2018. And just really quickly, I want to, transportation planning rule analysis. And in it does say that, right here it says that we met, wait just a second. The analysis dated April 2nd, 2018 summarized how the requirements of the Oregon Administrative Rule, the Transportation Planning Rule, are met for the subject properties. The surrounding roadways and intersections were found to have sufficient capacity to accommodate the proposed annexation and zone change in the DCP area. The transportation planning rule requirements of state statute were determined to have been met as documented in the analysis. I just wanted to bring that up, that we did do that, if you want to look for that.
Any questions?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Okay, so unless there's no more testimony to be had, I will close the public testimony. Is there any discussion on this matter? Start with you, Derek.
Yeah, I think it fits within the plan. I agree with Brian that we've got to be mindful of that inventory. I think with the way that the building's going on right now, as long as things like this, to speak to, was it Bob that spoke? We can't upgrade the road until things like this happen. So when it does get developed, that's when these roads get redone. So I'm in favor.
Mr. Serlet.
I too am in favor. And again, I share the concern about Redwood. It's going to be a mess until it does get upgraded, but that's just the way the system works. So be it.
Okay. Edit? Andre.
Yeah, I've got a question for Brian. At this time, when the property is being annexed, is it city requirement to receive a transportation analysis, or is that required at the development stage?
Well, in this particular case, there was a kind of overall general transportation study done when the Redwood concept plan was approved. That year-long, 18-month process included a transportation element that studied the entire concept plan area and what effect it would have with full development as proposed. And then with this particular one, as Swellens mentioned, there was a TPR analysis, and again, that basically indicates that their analysis of full development of this property and the entire North Redwood concept plan as proposed did not result in any projects in the 2010 transportation plan that would be needed to accommodate full development of the entire North Redwood concept plan area. I'm not sure if I've really answered your question, though. I mean,
so it sounds like a study.
You're saying the stage, then a true transportation for a development would happen with a subdivision application. So, and depending on the distance between 2015 has probably been long enough now, when we did the overall concept plan transportation analysis, we would ask at the time of a development application for another traffic study to be done. Because they look at particulars. They know exactly what's being proposed and exactly how many houses, and they know exactly what streets are going to be connecting to others at that time. And so they usually do analysis of any traffic accidents that have happened in the past 3 years anywhere in the vicinity. That wasn't done in the previous studies because it wasn't a development transportation study. It was an overall kind of study. So there's a different emphasis when you have an actual development. And so we usually require one.
That answers my question. It sounds like it's not required at this time, but a previous study was, some sort of transportation study was completed during the concept development stage of all of these properties, and it seemed to not have any transportation issues brought up at that time, so I don't have any concerns.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember, obviously, it's annexation and zone change. There's no development attached to this application, so for what we have in front of us, I am definitely in favor. Obviously, the street is an issue. We all know that. Anybody who's driven on that street knows it. But I am certain that'll probably be addressed again when the development comes forward. So I'm definitely in favor of this.
All right.
Yeah, I'm in favor of it.
I too. So I will entertain a motion to approve the annexation and zoning map amendment to annex 4.84 acres consisting of one tax lot and adjacent right-of-way on North Redwood Street located within the North Redwood Development Concept Plan area, and to rezone from County RRFF-5 to R-1 Low Density Residential.
Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve ANN 18-04 / ZC 18-05 Swellen.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. We will now consider a request from Active Water Sports for a site and design review and conditional use permit to construct a 28,975 square foot building for use as a watercraft sales and storage facility at the southeast corner of Southeast First Avenue and South Hazeldale Way in the Canby Pioneer Industrial Park. That's DR 18-07 /CUP 18-06. As we agreed when the meeting started, I will not go through the entire list here of things that are for this, but I would ask if there are any conflicts of interest here, ex parte contact. Any questions from folks out here of the commissioners that regarding conflict of interest or ex parte contact? Okay, Brian.
Okay, this proposal is a development they're calling Active Water Sports. I believe they have an operation currently in Oregon City that's moving here. It's recreational boat sales and storage type facility. And this is only one of 3 properties in our Pioneer Industrial Park that has the CM zoning district, commercial manufacturing, rather than the M1 and M2, the light industrial and heavy industrial. So there's only 3 properties, and we've got 2 of them on the agenda tonight that have the CM zoning side by side. This is at the corner there, southwest corner of the intersection of Hazeldale Way and Southeast First Avenue. The site has a house and accessory building on it, and those are going to be removed from the property. And the property has frontage on both Hazeldale Way and Southeast First Avenue, and they're proposing a driveway on the far southeast corner of Hazeldale, and then another driveway about midway on First Avenue. The application includes not only our normal design review that we require citywide for any brand new building to be built on a property, but it also includes a conditional use permit. And that is because of the number of acres for this site. It's almost 4 acres. They're not going to meet the minimum 12 employees per acre that is still a standard within the industrial overlay zone. And it says that if you're not expected to meet that, then you must gain approval of a conditional use permit as well. So that's why we have that application. The review criteria for site and design reviews, the next items will be the same review criteria. We talk about the parking and loading requirements, bicycle parking requirements, the applicable zoning district, which is the CM, and then the Cambia Industrial Overlay Zone that applies to the Pioneer Industrial Park, including these properties, has some development standards that supersede the underlying development standards that you would have in the CM zone district. In this particular case, the applicant, I'll show you later, is proposing 3 wall signs on the building, but they're not trying to get approval of those now. They'll have separate sign permits that go through the city and building permit process to actually get approval for those. But they're letting you know about those 3 signs that they're proposing. Outdoor lighting standards, we have access limitations that the staff reports addressed. And then the site design review criteria that include, in this instance, a point matrix that was superseded by the overlay district. So they did the overlay district point matrix that is intended to give flexibility but require a certain level of points to meet quality standards. Quality development is what those point matrices are trying to get at. and that exercise that each applicant that needs to go through. And then we talked about the conditional use and then our normal review procedures for types of applications and such. This is an assessor's map showing you the location of that property at that intersection. And here's a site plan that they submitted for development of the property. There's a building, 28,000 and some square feet. Don't remember the exact amount here. 28,975 square feet. So one of the important aspects is the applicant in the packet, in the material that you have, talks about the fact that he was going to use building material called Kingspan insulated panel system. We spent quite some time early on at the pre-application visiting with the applicant about the use of that material. And it actually is a steel frame supported by a thin metal siding that is covered with various types of materials. In this case, they were putting a stucco-like granite-looking material sprayed onto that metal siding. Our conclusion was that that was something that we could allow because the actual surfacing on that material was not metal and did not give the appearance of metal. There was some concern about that voiced, and the applicant gave me a call indicating several weeks back that he had changed his mind and planned a concrete tilt-up construction. And that is by far the predominant type of building material we have in the industrial park right now. I bring that up because I did also ask, if possible, that we could see some elevations of that building with the new material, and that did not arrive in time for the meeting. So you may want to ask the applicant about his plans for building material. So the site plan shows this large building up near the front being Hazeldale, and then a large outdoor storage area they've indicated to be paved with parking spaces aligning a couple of the sides and the back, and 2 designated loading areas. On the north edge, on Southeast First, there is that additional driveway, and then there's a stormwater detention facility, is what that other structure is that you see. There, one of the biggest issues in reviewing this is Southeast First Avenue is a very substandard street. And so there's a lot of improvements that are necessary along that street frontage. However, there is a sanitary sewer in both Hazeldale and First Avenue serving this property. Hazeldale is fully improved except for the needed sidewalk. And so there'll be a planter strip and then a 6-foot sidewalk. And then you'll have the same thing on the first part of Southeast First. You head westward down the hill and around the bend in the road, you get down to a low elevation, which any of you that have visited the site, there's a pond down there at the very western end. Position in the road improvements and the dedication of right-of-way as you get down into that area. And that's actually been a difficult planning aspect of this, dealing with the transition, so because the pond can't be disturbed and must be retained, and there actually is a pond on both sides of the road. And so we have a planned industrial road going through 2 ponds that have to be maintained and doesn't allow enough room for our standard street cross sections. And so we've seen in detail in the past year, and have decided what the absolute minimum is. It's 12 lanes for traffic, 12-foot wide lanes, and an adjacent 4-foot curb-tight sidewalk. And that seems to have allowed us to be able to the very minimum standards for a local industrial road at that constriction, and then it'll transition out in each direction to the full standard cross-section for an industrial street. So I wanted you to be aware of that particular uniqueness. Because of that, there's also slight modification to one of the conditions of approval that the applicant has asked for, and so I'll mention that here in a minute too. Here's some elevations of the building. These were indicated what the building was to look like with the Kingston insulated metal panels. This may be different looking with the tilled-up concrete, so I'm not going to dwell on these, but give you some idea what that was going to look like. They've given an indication of both sides here. So this is the landscaping plan. Very good job in front of along Hazeldale and along Southeast First Avenue, giving us some concentration of landscaping at the street frontages where you're going to see the buildings and such from both sides. Less so as your interior where there's a lot of pavement and such, but we feel like it's a good landscape plan and we're pleased with it and meets the code requirements. So a couple of the conditions that were unique to this application that weren't just processing ones, we already talked about the sign requirements. They'll get separate permits for that. And then the traffic study that was performed for this property as a development, we felt like it was large enough that we asked for one. The only thing they found necessary was on Southeast First Avenue. There is I don't know what, it's not really a curve, but it results in a curve in the street. And because of that, it causes sight distance at the speed limits if cars are going on through, if you're going to propose a driveway out on that particular street. So they've cautioned, and we made a condition of approval, that if you can't meet the sight distance requirements for pulling out of a driveway looking both directions, I believe it's 280 feet, but whatever it is, at the posted speed limit, then they need to change and eliminate what's causing the site restriction, which is currently elevation of the property itself. You can't see over the hill to see Hazeldale and cars that could be coming out or down from Southeast First past that intersection. The applicant, I actually had a visit with him today on the phone, and says they're confident that they'll be able to meet that. And that's important because then they'll be able to keep their driveway that's proposed on Southeast First Avenue. Let me jump real quick to the change in the condition of approval. That's page 12 of your packet, but item number 2, condition of approval, talks about the project being in conformance with the applicable findings and requirements by our city engineer in his memorandum of 11/6/18. And I was going to add to that sentence, or as otherwise determined to be suitable by city staff with final technical review during construction plan preparation. The reason is exactly the exact right-of-way width that's going to be needed on Southeast First Avenue, because apparently the right-of-way varies between the two properties we're reviewing tonight. It's an odd very odd amount of right-of-way that exists today. It's not consistent across the full distance. Because of the transition and restriction, we want to make sure that we're not requiring any more than we need, but we do get what we do need. The standard is a 50-foot right-of-way. It's substandard in some areas and actually exceeds in others. And also to make the transition of the road pavement exactly as it needs to be. The applicant thinks there's some discrepancy at this point in time. So we've indicated we'd add this to the condition of approval, give us a little leeway during the construction plan approval stage for staff to lessen the requirements that are currently in the city engineer's memo if need be, because we are recommending that we follow those requirements that are in his memo. And there's a possibility that during a more in-depth analysis that might slightly change. So I wanted you to be aware of that. So staff did conclude that it's in full conformance with their comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance. We think that site and design standards have met the acceptable compatibility scores, and that this site can certainly accommodate the proposed use. We have no problem with approving the conditional use permit for the minimum 12 employees per acre. There's certainly evidence that if they're successful in this location, that they could expand. They'll come closer to meeting that standard over time if they are. And it is unique in having the CM zoning in our industrial park, so we think this is a suitable use because it is somewhat of a commercial type use versus a manufacturing use, but that's what the zoning is appropriate for at this location. So we do recommend approval of this request and with the conditions that we've mentioned in the staff report.
Thank you, Brian. Are there any questions for Brian?
I have one, Brian. That the additional language on the conditions was condition 3?
It's actually condition 2. It's in there for the city engineer memorandum.
Do we need to add that to our conditions if we approve this?
Yeah, if you could
you give
say
me the wording on that?
Well, I can give it to you again if you'd like. Okay. At the very end of it, or as otherwise determined to be suitable by city staff with final technical review during construction plan preparation.
Okay. To be suitable by city staff, and then what? I'm not that fast.
With final technical review during construction plan preparation. I think the main thing is putting it on record here. It'll be in the minutes and such, and so that as we move into the construction stage and we look at the possible discrepancy that the applicants raised, they'll know that we're in a willingness to look at that, but in the end, the city staff is going to determine what we think the appropriate road improvement is within the bounds of the standard, which we're already lowering and changing because of the transition.
I've got a question for Brian. I'm assuming that right-of-way dedication is not an option or cannot be required by the city to make that road wide enough at that corner?
There was in the city engineer's memorandum a request that we might need some possible additional right-of-way right at the intersection of Hazeldale in order to comment. I'm not sure if it was for ADA ramps or what that was for, but he said something about right at the intersection, possible need for additional right-of-way. But otherwise, our normal standard is to try to obtain a minimum of 52 foot of right-of-way. And that may or may not be exactly what we need for the full frontage of this property on their side. That's what still needs to be ironed out for absolutely certain. Just the blanket statement indicated by the city engineer in his memorandum may or may not be absolutely correct.
Is it appropriate to add a conditional, a use, or a condition of approval? And obviously, with this site and design review, and elevations may have changed. Should we add a condition of approval to have city staff review the new elevations when they come in? Being that they could be different tonight, and maybe they'll present them tonight. I'm not sure, but if they don't present those tonight, it's hard to approve something without being able to see the design that we're approving.
You may want to consider something like that. As I indicated, let's see what the applicant says during his presentation.
Sure.
And our main concern was a belief that he was going to utilize the new standard tilled-up concrete construction, because that's what he told me on the phone. And so that's what I want to follow up mainly with. And then you usually see elevations, so you get some idea what buildings look like. And so if you feel comfortable enough by a description that maybe the applicant can give tonight, then sure, I think you could leave that in staff's hands. If we think there's something awry, it could come back to you or something. But you don't have to see the elevations. It's something that you normally get a chance to see, to get a feel. And part of the reason is you want quality development, and if you can get, a large warehouse kind of building that has something of interest, either a stripe, indentations every now and then, something that makes it more than just a box, is what, if you look at most of the developments in the industrial park, there's something that gives them some interest to them. And we don't know right now what it's actually going to look like. If they're going to use tilled-up concrete, we know it's going to be a solid, good building, but we don't know exactly what it's going to look like.
Any more questions for Ryan? Okay, who would like to speak for the applicant? Please state your name and address.
My name is Randy Saunders. My address is 2225 Country Club Road, Woodburn. The elevations that you saw are the elevations of the building. The materials changed, but the colors and the configuration of the colors is going to be the same. It's just like that. But it'll be tilt-up concrete rather than the pre-manufactured panel. And other than that, I have nothing more to say.
Any questions for the applicant? Thank you very much. Okay. I think that we have now, if I'm reading this correctly, I have a Kathy Pauley that would like to speak on this. Doesn't indicate whether you're pro or con, it just says you represent yourself and your brother. Is that correct?
That's correct.
If you will step forward, state your name and address, please.
My name is Kathy Pauley. I live at 12678 South New Era Road. It's an Oregon City address. It's out in the county. And I am here tonight representing myself and my brother, Alan Burden, We own the property directly across Hazeldale Way from this property that is in question. And our question actually is about all three of the properties that you're considering tonight in the industrial park. The city of Canby is currently considering truck regulations and truck routes, and at the last city council meeting they were talking about making it more clear what for the police to be able to write tickets where the trucks were supposed to be and where they're not supposed to be. And there is a lot of discussion about truck routes. I read all three of the application, the paperwork reports for tonight's meeting. None of them specifically address how many trucks will be going in and out. And it's not a complaint. It is a concern. It is something that I feel, and my brother Alan feels, should be considered on every industrial parcel. And I have 2 other parcels in the park besides the one that I share with my brother Alan. The active water sports one, according to this report, talks about the number of trips that will be going in and out of the park. It doesn't say anything about how much of that is truck traffic. The one on Little Stinky.
But we can't talk about that.
That's fine. All three of them specifically talk about trips. They do not talk about trucks. And all I'm asking is that the commission and the council both be considering truck traffic because of the impact of a semi on traffic versus a car is large. And I think you need to make sure that anytime you're doing a traffic study that you make sure that it tells you how much of it is trucks. That's all.
Any questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Warren Fries? Yes. If you could step forward with your name and address, please.
Okay, Warren Fries, Active Water Sports. My home address is actually 141 Winlock, Washington State, 98596. What I'm here to support is obviously the building of our building. I can assure you we'll be good neighbors as we are everywhere else we are. As far as answering the truck, currently I would expect on a very busy month we would maybe see 3 to 4 actually truckloads of boats that show up on a monthly basis. It's not not a daily basis. Equipment, merchandise, if our internet business grows, I still don't see that. UPS trucks maybe would be a daily thing. Your average size you see coming out of small businesses, not large 40-foot trucks. But I don't see us having a huge impact on the neighborhood or traffic with our trucks compared to, I believe, across the street from us, there's 20 acres that I think is talking about a beverage distributor going in there. I would think that if that happens, that's probably going to be a lot more impact than anything we can do. But other than that, I simply wanted to answer any other questions, or if anybody has a challenge with anything. I think the architect is probably more up to speed on whether we're meeting all your laws. I know, so you understand the paneling or siding issue, probably would have saved us, a couple $100,000 building that way. We had a neighbor that implored us to do the cement, so rather than fight with a neighbor and slow down our process, we went ahead and went to the cement tilt up. So if that answers that question, that's kind of, I guess, the only I can tell you. We're a family-owned business. I still own 24 acres of property on Malino Road that my grandparents, my grandfather had the same name as I do, Warren Freese, when he bought on Malino Road in 1937. So I'm excited to I wish my dad or my grandfather was alive to see this project, but I'm hoping you vote for it. So that's about all I got.
Any questions for Mr. Freese?
Okay, thank you.
Thank
It's great to see you checking with God before the, I appreciate that. So
you're welcome. Let's see. Any other testimony on the AWS project? Bob, I have you down for the little stinky one.
I think I wrote all three.
Oh, did you? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'd like to speak in favor.
I was.
That's all right.
Yeah.
My name is Ed Patton. I'm from Udell Engineering and Land Surveying at 63 East Ash Street in Lebanon. I just want to say that we concur with the city's staff report and conditions of approval as modified and presented today. Thank you.
Any questions? Okay, Bob. Please state your name and address again.
My name's Bob Canberra. I live at 1338 North Maple here in Canby. I'm not opposed to the development or anything. I'd like to make a request of the commission. My reading of my map here is that this particular location and the locations of the others that you're going to be considering tonight, at some point in time, their outlet will be out through Hazeldale and will join on to Sequoia at that intersection. They will have an impact, a major impact on that intersection, which is right now one of our busy intersections here in Canby. That particular intersection is not mentioned in the city's 2010 transportation system plan. And I believe the commission can take the initiative to inform the city council that they need to move on presently moving that intersection and designating it as an intersection that needs to be considered part of the city's transportation system plan presently. And you can do that by requesting them to consider it. That will trigger them looking at researching and appraising whether that something should be done at that intersection now with present funding. The alternative is for us to wait for the next Canby transportation system plan to be reviewed and to be implemented. My understanding, and I'm sure that Mr. Brown can correct me, in all likelihood that will be the next, it will take about 2 years from now before that system study starts. 2-year delay on this intersection with all of the growth that is projected within the plus all of the growth that is occurring up and down, right? We have a huge town apartment complex on Saratoga. You have the bus barn there. You have a busy Fred Meyer complex there. I think that intersection is really taxed right now. And as we bring in new businesses, that intersection will be further taxed. I think it would be prudent for us to move quickly now to ask the city council to include it in the transportation plan so that they can start to develop an answer instead of waiting 2 years down before we get an answer that will be be outdated, okay? Thank you.
Any questions? Brian, do you want to say?
Yeah, I'd like to go ahead and address that. Bob is right spot on, and he's ahead of the game, and that is number one project that the city staff's been working on for the last couple of months, and it's been a moving target, and it's been changing over that time period. But the latest is that the city administrator is going to move as quickly as possible to the city council and ask for use of urban renewal funds to erect a stoplight immediately this year at that intersection. And so it does take the city council to make that final decision and to agree to utilize the last bonded indebtedness that the urban renewal district will allow us so that we can move very quickly to get that completed. And part of the impetus behind that is all of the development that is happening within the industrial park and the what looks like the certainty of a large industrial development, which was mentioned tonight, the bottling distribution plant that we have an application for now. That will absolutely trigger the need for that, and it must be operational before they are.
Does that help you?
Yes, and I think why I'm here today is I recognize the support that's going to be needed. And I think that Planning Commission's support of that kind of an effort will be further statement about how important it is. And I think you as a commission should review this and put it on your agenda, maybe to consider reviewing it and putting a letter out to the city council to support this. If you think this intersection is one of our most problematic and will be here facing you every time you look at this kind of developments in this area.
I think that since you have the city manager already fast-tracking this, that will be more beneficial to that end than us. We can support it, but the city manager is all over it. So
glad to hear it, but I'm telling you, your letter of support adds to that statement.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. Let's see. Have we done that one? That one. Any other testimony on this project? Okay. I will now consider a
We still need discussion.
Oh, that's right.
Deliberation.
God, it's so tired. Sorry about that.
That's fine.
Andre, we'll start with you this time.
I've got no comments.
Okay. Sean?
I'm pleased with hearing that the elevations will look the same. So that satisfies that desire for me. I know too, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think that city's working on other access points into the industrial park as well, so that will help. So I'm in favor of this. I think it looks great, and it'll be fun to have another dealership of sorts in town, I think. So,
Mr. Boatwright.
Maybe I'll buy a boat from
I'm
you.
in favor of it. I like it.
Eric?
Yeah, I think it's a good fit for what we've designated that area for.
Mr. Sir?
Likewise.
And I'm in agreement with that. Now I will entertain a motion to approve the request from Active Water Sports for a site and design review and conditional use permit to construct a 28,975 square foot building for use as a watercraft sales and storage facility at the southeast corner of Southeast First Avenue and South Hazeldale Way in the Canby Pioneer Industrial Park, DR 18-07 /CUP 1806, Active Water Sports, I would like to add that I agree with Bob. I think that we should send the city council a letter of recommendation that they move expeditiously on the intersection.
Mr. Chair, I move that we consider a request or approve a request from Active Water Sports for a site and design review and conditional use permit to construct a 28,975 square foot building for use as watercraft sales and storage facility on the southeast corner of Southeast First Avenue and South Hazeldale Way in the Canby Pioneer Industrial Park, DR 18-07/CUP 18-06, Active Water Sports.
I would second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you very much. We will now consider a request from Chris and Kelly Classen. Is that correct? Clayson, thank you. For a site and design review to develop a new 2-story office building with paved on-site parking and a gravel vehicle storage yard at 1793 Southeast First Avenue for their septic system business, DR 18-08. I'll say this with a straight face, Lil Stinky Environmental. Is that correct? That's right. Okay, so, Brian, take up the Little Stinky
You want to take a
business.
quick poll on any conflicts of interest on this one?
Any conflicts of interest on Little Stinky?
No, sir.
No. Ex parte contact?
No.
Use the product, but no.
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
There you are, sorry about that.
Okay, another design review, site and design review, brand new construction with, in the Pioneer Industrial Park. This property is just to the west of the Active Water Sports you just reviewed. You see a little blue line on the screen, which is a kind of historic stream that used to cross the properties here. It actually has a kind of underground stream now that comes out into the pond that's on this property. And so this is kind of the origin of that stream now. It doesn't go any further as it's shown on the map any longer. The property. Okay. So the property does have the pond to be preserved in the northeast corner. Takes up a fairly large part and limits where a driveway access is suitable. You see the site plan here in a minute. I think they've placed the necessary access for development in the best possible location and have a very good layout for developing this somewhat small, a little less than an acre, I think, piece of property. There, let's see if there's anything else I wanted to mention. Still subject to the same industrial overlay development requirements where it's located at. I don't know why I have two of these. And our review criteria is the same as we just reviewed for Active Water Sports. And here is the proposed site plan. We have a 4,732 square foot building that's 2 stories in height on the property. And just to the west is the private drive that leads up to the Canby mini storage facility, self-storage facility. It was built a couple of years ago. Seems to be doing pretty well. They're proposing parking in the front off of their drive down to Southeast First. And they have 8 parking spaces. 2 of those are actually within the garage maintenance or shop portion of the building, which is in this area. You'll see the garage doors here in the picture. and then they have a fenced-in area for the storage of their service vehicles for their business operations that they plan on in this area. They've indicated in their application, just kind of mentioning that they're thinking of this as somewhat of a storage yard. We have a provision within our code that can allow gravel or kind of engineered graveled surfacing that won't result in potholes and mud and such when it's considered a long-term kind of storage yard for outdoor equipment, whatever it is. It can be vehicles. The issue is, wanted you to be aware of, is if there is constant daily in and out of most of the vehicles that are parked in here, that portion really should be paved. And my understanding is, right now, to my knowledge, they're not planning on paving any of this. So my question would be, the gates here, maybe a row of vehicles that are on daily in and out for service or something, that portion should potentially be paved by our code. Might add some expense to it. I think a good portion of this area can still be the gravel and be considered a storage yard. But if there's some portion of it that really is daily in and out, our code says it should be paved. We get called on that by some other uses in town, like an RV storage lot. We require them, and they're for people storing and out of season their RVs, but yet there's enough traffic going in and out on a daily basis that we require all of those facilities to be paved in the past. I don't know that this equates to that in any way, but I know I receive calls if we allow gravel parking lots. If it's not really a parking lot, then it's not a problem. We can call it a storage yard.
Brian, can we define that a little bit better? I mean, when you say a storage lot, parking lot, would you say that vehicles are in there and not moving for a period of?
Oh, we don't have any definition in the code, so it's up to your discretion on how you think and what you think would be appropriate not to be, because there is some advantage to gravel in less stormwater runoff, and so that is an advantage. We don't want to pave the entire surface of developing properties if we don't need to. And so if you are less frequently using, it's obviously not a required parking lot. That parking's provided in front of the building and is paved. So staff's, it's just a gray area. Staff's okay, but we're not that certain of their operations and how they work with the vehicles that they are parking in there. And if every single day, every one of those vehicles is coming in and out, I'm not sure that's a storage yard. That's all I'm raising. Here's elevations of this building. The south elevation would be back against the mini self-storage facility. We've got the north elevation that you'll see from Northwest First Avenue. And then you have the west that's along the private drive leading to the mini storage. And then you have the front, which you can see the 3 garage shop bays for servicing their operation vehicles here, and then the front door here. And they've got the 2-story aspect. They've got a canopy over their front door, and here's a floor plan indicating the 2 garage bays, and then a 3rd garage door located in this area right here as well. and some open office space, and then you've got offices upstairs. This is the upstairs layout, I guess. And take a look at this. I was very impressed with the looks of this building. This is Reveal Hardy board, which is basically a cementish type fiber siding. Perfectly legitimate. We have, I don't know whether we have any other use of that. We've got the wall that you see from Southeast First on the mini warehouse facility is hardy board, the backside. The rest of it's mostly metal looking because they have metal doors everywhere. And so that was a stretch for us too, thinking about the no metal siding requirement in our industrial park and improving the mini storage facility because of the number of metal doors. But we felt like it was not appropriate to make them use wood doors for those mini warehouse facilities. But you've got varying colors, some cedar over the front door there. And then around the back, they have a conference room downstairs, and they have an outdoor space, kind of picnic area for their employees as well, that they put a screening on as well. So I think it's quite a nice looking facility. So we've got the unique conditions again. They haven't proposed a sign at this point, so they'll be coming in later for their sign permit. And I missed seeing the bicycle parking spaces on their site plan, so we've kind of asked during the construction stage that they revise their site plan and make sure that we can see where they're putting their 4 bicycle parking spaces. That'll meet the requirements if they do that. And then they've got 3 street trees shown on their plan. We want to make sure that they provide the street tree fee for those particular trees. And they've indicated the use of drought-tolerant plants and no irrigation. We've had mixed reviews with some past industrial uses that we've allowed no irrigation. One was, I don't know if any of you were here, the Dragonberry facility. Very nice building. They're doing well. They set up temporary irrigation system, got their landscaping all started just great. Then they took it up and it all died. Just the timing was bad for them. And so it took them quite some time to get something going again because of that. So we put a condition of approval in here just to make sure the applicant realized they may be taking a slight risk and not doing an irrigation system, because we do require the landscaping they put in to be maintained through the life of the building. It's an ordinance requirement that you always have the landscaping in place. But if you feel comfortable with them trying that, we have done that in a couple other instances with mixed results. We have recommended approval of this, and I did want to, I've got to check to see 2 things. I wanted to make sure if I got any additional. We had a request from ODOT Region 1 to require a traffic study. And I let the applicant know that that was a possibility. It came very late in the process. And I called ODOT, talked with them, talked with DKS, our traffic consultant. They helped me very quickly determine that in this particular case, with this square footage of building, with the intended use, that they would have no more than 40 trips generated per day and no more than 10 p.m. peak hour trips. Our normal trigger for a full traffic study and any off-site review of traffic impacts is 50 PM peak hour trips, or AM, if it happens to be the AM. So they're far below our normal trigger. We had told them at the pre-app meeting that we didn't think their building and operation was large enough to require a traffic study by the criteria within our code. And ODOT requested that they do one. When I talked to them, they sent me back a memo that's in the record now indicating with that information about the trips, ODOT has determined that the traffic impact analysis is not needed. So it would be more up to you if you feel like one is needed or not. Staff felt that it met the criteria for waiving the study, and that's what we told them at the pre-app. So other than that, there was an omission. Actually, the applicant's engineer was discussing it with our city engineer yesterday, and staff, for whatever reason, it wasn't in our saved area for attaching to the application in your packet. We did not see the memorandum from our city engineer. And so we'd like to add a condition of approval that, maybe I should just go to that, tell you what number it could be. We're going to call it condition 4A. And it would be that the project must be in conformance with the applicable findings and requirements outlined by the city engineer in his memorandum dated 11/6/2018, or as otherwise determined to be suitable by the city staff with final technical review of the construction plans during their preparation. And
I couldn't write fast enough.
Yeah, so it's the same condition we just did on the water sports. And what we want is for the two developments, because one of the questions that has arisen is where the curb line should be on the full width portions of the streets, and should the water sports one be the same thing as the environmental services one is proposing, and trying to iron out the exact right-of-way dedication that's going to be needed, because it varies along the street. So those are details I couldn't iron out in the few days that this issue came up. And so let's push it to the construction stage, sit down with the Public Works Director and the city engineer and their engineers, and they'll work out what the final requirements will be. We'd have recommended approval of this request, subject to the conditions, adding that additional condition 4A.
Okay. Any questions for Brian? Okay, can we hear from the applicant, please? Please state your name and address.
Iceland Architects, 1307 7th Street, Oregon City. I have some additional drawings and color board submitted for the record, most of them. We have revised elevations. Elevations that were submitted in the packet have some striping on them, and they don't match the rendering, and this just updates those to match the rendering, and then material board, which clarifies what we're intending to do with the colors.
If they really want us to, we could do that, but it'll take us a little time to do that.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought you could just incorporate it.
Why don't you just forge ahead?
Okay. It's a very small building. It's a very constrained site because of the pond. There's been some fill work done there with permits over the last year and a half, I believe, to make the site buildable. Their operation is pretty small. They're planning on growth in the future. The gravel equipment yard is for that future growth and for weekend storage of vehicles. Currently, they have 2 pump trucks. They don't have any large vehicles. They have 1 or 2 semis a year that make deliveries to the site for pipe and larger pumps and equipment, but it's very infrequent. We have 9 employees currently to meet the employment standard, which this site also has an overlay similar to the water sports.
Will the storage area that's been discussed, will it be used daily for dispatch of vehicles, or will the vehicles be in the building and departing from there?
The building will be used for maintenance of the vehicles. I'm anticipating they be stored there on weekends in the gravel yard. I could be wrong. Is that correct?
Yeah, we may have 3 trucks twice a day.
Okay. I don't know who that is, so I'm gonna, actually, I do know who it is, because your name is on here, but for the record.
For the record,
Yeah,
that's Chris Clayson, the property owner.
Yeah, that's, so for the record, your name and address,
It's
please.
Christopher Clayson, 19631 South Colder Drive, Oregon City. And yeah, we would have approximately 3 trucks that would leave the yard once a day, come back once a day. That's service trucks. Employee vehicles would be in addition to that, but they would not be parking in that area.
Okay. Did that answer your question, John? Okay.
The building appears to have 3 service bays, but only 2 of them are really for service. The third is to open up the office area to the outside and for classes that they may do for environmental issues.
It's a trick of the eye.
Okay. Thank you. Any other
questions? We also have the civil engineer here if there are any questions about utilities or.
That be Pat?
Yes, that would be Pat Sissel.
Yeah. We're familiar with Pat.
I've got one question. So would you be willing to pave, because you just kind of indicated that that is going to be for daily use into the yard where your trucks are going to be?
I don't see that being a problem. I was under the impression that more permeable surface would be preferred from the planning aspect. That's why that area was primarily left permeable. If it was desired by the commissioner or the planning department,
Yeah, I think what we've been indicated is just where you're having that common use area from a in and out for your trucks. I think for the rest of the stuff, you're right. For the permeable surface is for things that are stored for long term, so that you don't have runoff, that kind of stuff. It drains into there. But what we've indicated basically, or what Brian's indicated, is that if you are doing daily use, we have a condition that we have to apply.
Sure.
Okay.
The gate area and maybe
Just that one
vehicles
side
in there.
where you're parking.
Space for those 3 vehicles to leave daily, I think would be sufficient.
Okay.
As far as the drought tolerant landscaping, they are going to be the owner and occupant of the facility, so they have an incentive to maintain it. They want the project to look nice.
Yeah. Well, the building certainly, it's a nice looking building.
Sure is.
Yeah.
And we're working with an award-winning landscape architect who specializes in northwest vegetation, so he's assured us that his landscape plan is not only going to look good, but be resilient.
Thank you. Any more?
No.
Any
Not much of
questions?
questions.
Any questions?
I've got some questions. So you've got 3 trucks at the moment. Do you seeing your business growing over the next couple years to maybe doubling the truck count or whatnot? I just want to make sure we've got enough paving for future growth that doesn't track, the dirt and whatnot that the gravel parking lot may bring out into your private parking lot and then on onto the public road.
Right. Well, I would love for our business to double. That would be fantastic. So, yeah, future plan, if that's the desire of the foresight. I can say this, that when we talk about gravel storage, we're not talking about what you would traditionally think of as a gravel storage. We're thinking of more of a clean ballast permeable surface, not just, go to the rock quarry and get some 3/4 minus and spread it out.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have one, John.
Okay.
The pond, is it a year-round pond or seasonal?
Well, it went dry this year.
Sorry, can you speak into the mic?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep.
It definitely went dry this year. I was under the impression that it was 360, but there was no water in it.
It's a pretty dry year.
Dry year. Thank you very much. Pat, do you have anything that you'd like to add? I always love to hear from you, son. It's been so long.
Just wanted to speak to Brian's condition of approval. So for the record, Pat Sissel Engineering, 375 Portland Avenue, Gladstone. Brian mentioned adding that condition of approval, I think it was 4A, regarding the city engineer's memo. We don't have a concern with that as it was worded. We'd have a concern with the memo because it mentioned an existing 40-foot wide right-of-way and needing to dedicate to 52 feet. The existing right-of-way is actually something over 50 feet in front of this site, but as Brian mentioned, it varies. There was a 40-foot wide right-of-way there, and there was a dedication done on the north side of varying width. It's off by about a degree. Why it was done that way, I don't know, but it causes the right-of-way to go from about 49 feet near Sequoia to about 53 feet near Hazeldale. That's why all the discussion tonight regarding the memo and the flexibility for the future. So anyway, as Brian mentioned, we don't have any concerns with that condition being added.
Any questions for? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so Kathy, Polly, please restate your name and address, please.
Kathy Polly, 12678 South New Era Road in Oregon City. I grew up directly across the street from where this is proposed. I was at the neighborhood meeting. I had a chance to look at their landscape plan, which is a lot more detailed than what you saw. My father did landscape design, and I have had a chance to look at a lot of them. This one was wonderful, and it has all native material. It is likely to be more, it is more likely to be able to withstand drought than a lot of other kinds of plants that you could put in. As far as the water is concerned, there are springs there on both sides of the road. And the road itself was built up about an angle like this, which is why you can't widen anything without putting a huge amount of fill. The spring, when I spoke out of turn earlier, I apologize. There is an underground flow that comes out of the ground where you're calling it a pond now. And then there are springs on the other side of the road which belong to what was Hazeldale Gardens property. Now it's Burden property. I have no objection at all to anything that I have seen, what they intend to do, other than just the comment about the council and the planning commission being, continuing to consider the amount of truck traffic, which industrial park is going to have truck traffic. But I am very impressed with the design, and I personally have no objection to it.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Okay. Bob left. Okay. In that case, is there any more testimony on this from neutral parties? Okay. Any rebuttal feel necessary? Okay. I will close the public testimony, and are there any further questions that you guys might have? Okay. No more discussion. So at this time, we'll entertain a motion to approve. Let's see, where have I lost this? Oh. Motion to approve a request from Chris and Kelly Klassen for a site and design review to develop a new 2-story office building with paved on-site parking and a gravel vehicle storage yard. I think we're going to amend part of that. At 1793 Southeast First Avenue for their septic system business DR 18-08 Lil Stinky Environmental. Have a kind of a motion on that, please.
Mr. Chair, I'll motion to approve DR 1808 Little Stinky Environmental at 1793 Southeast First Avenue for a septic system business with the conditions that the staff brought forth and the condition to require paved area for their service vehicles.
Have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Okay, we will now consider a request from Tricia Kenny for a conditional use permit to locate a physical fitness training business in an existing approved flex space industrial building at 138 South Hazeldale Way in the Canby Pioneer Industrial Park, CUP 18-05 Kenny. Are there any conflicts of interest you know of?
Mr. Chair, I do know the Kinneys, and I've gone to church with them and known them through networking with the chamber, but it does not affect my decision-making skills for tonight. So I do plan to participate.
Okay. Anybody else? Ex parte contact? Okay. Brian.
Okay, we have another site and design review and conditional, actually it's just a conditional use permit, I'm sorry, because the building's already built. So this is the OCI Reimers building, and one of the, I forget whether there's 12 or so tenant spaces in that flex space industrial building that's located on the property shown here on Hazeldale. And the proposal here is for the CrossFit training facility to lease out one of the tenant spaces in there. And the use as defined in the zoning ordinance is not an outright permitted use in the in the M1 zone. I get my zoning districts confused here tonight since we're talking CM in the M1 zone, but is a clearly listed as a use that's suitable within the M1 zone with approval of a conditional use permit. So one of the criteria that you kind of think about is that industrial zoning is fairly important because it is primarily intended to serve manufacturing type uses and such. And those kind of uses aren't allowed anywhere else in other zoning districts. Whereas this use could easily be perfectly suitable in this location and allowed with approval of a conditional use. But it could also be appropriate in other commercial zoning districts if there was available space that was suitable that they could find. And I think that's where they've come down to, oh, this is a perfect location for their use, a ready-built building and space. And those are fairly limited around Canby and other commercial zoning districts. But I want you to know that dynamic is that this use could find another zone district where it could go. A light manufacturing use could not. Therefore, it makes industrial zoning fairly valuable. So we don't want to be using up all of our industrial zone for non-industrial kinds of use, which I don't think's likely to happen. But there is another use already in a CM zone industrial area that is doing this similar kind of use. They built a storage facility for indoor RV storage, and they're renting it out to physical fitness training or something like that. And we hear that this is a very, very common use for industrial flex spaces around in other cities as well to be doing this. They need very minimal changes internally to utilize it. There's not a lot of changes they need to make to a kind of warehouse space. And so apparently it is a very suitable type space, and that's why they're making this request. Our review criteria is to think about the off-street loading and parking requirements. Those were based upon manufacturing / warehouse type use, not necessarily on a personal services kind of commercial use, which is a slightly higher parking standard. Our underlying M1 zone, we don't really need to consider access standards and such because we're talking about an existing building that's already developed, a very nice looking building out in our industrial park. So considerations with this conditional use just mentioned is displacement of any industrial space, should you have any concern about that, and the parking situation. The parking situation, the facility itself, we just approved it recently and met the code requirements. The issue really comes up in the fact that the owner of the property needs to designate apparently certain number of parking spaces for each tenant space. Well, the applicant shared with us that he's got 4 spaces designated. At least that's what I understand. And there are times early in the morning before anyone's even in the rest of the spaces where they may actually be doing their operation, their training. And after 5 is a common time also when they're fully utilizing their space. My understanding is they may have more than 4 vehicles come during those training sessions. So where are they going to park? If they're all reserved for each tenant space and it eventually fills up, they've indicated that they have some parking, although temporary, around behind the building where there's some gravel on the edge of the paved aisle surface that goes behind the building, because eventually that will be another row of parking spaces. And so it works out well now if they need some extra parking because they can't flow into other spaces nearby, that they can use that temporary spaces off the paved surface in the back. But that is if these spaces fill up, then the owner will likely build his second phase 2, and that temporary parking will be gone. The applicant indicated it's not that long of a lease, could be renewed. So I'm raising that as just an issue that may or may not be a problem. It's hard for staff to determine these things. Certainly at this point in time, it's not fully leased. It clearly doesn't seem to be a problem now, but hey, if the lease fills up and he decides to build a second building, that temporary parking that's readily available now may go away. And maybe at that time, the lease isn't renewed because the parking isn't available any longer. I don't know. So in review, it's in the staff report, talks about the conditions of approval that you consider with a conditional use. Well, in this case, they're really limited because you've got a building that's already there and built, and it's ready-made. There's no problem whatsoever in occupying this space by this intended use that we could see would anywhere adversely impact any of the surrounding properties by allowing this use, and shouldn't impact even the neighboring tenant spaces. If for some reason their exercise music is too loud, then I guess the owner will address that in the length of his lease terms for this use. So we concluded that it easily accommodates the proposed use. All the public services, everything is already there serving those tenant spaces. Won't alter the character of the surrounding area in any manner. Just that issue of displacement of industrial uses and the parking are the considerations. Staff did recommend approval. We did have one condition of approval, that they seek out any building permit for any tenant improvement that might need a building permit if for some reason they're going to do electrical or plumbing work, and get a business license from the city.
I'm more concerned about the loud disco music. That's just me. Any questions for Brian?
I do. Brian, you had one stipulation on there about the parking, that it's something we can put onto there as a condition for them to re-review if the overflow parking goes away.
Yeah, I didn't recommend it myself because I hate these administrative type things that sneak up on staff that we have to track and that we have to go out and monitor what's going on over time. But if you feel uncomfortable, but yet still want to approve this kind of use, since it is a common thing to do in industrial flex spaces, I just wanted you to be aware with a conditional use, anything that you feel like is necessary as a condition to monitor or manage something that might be a problem, you can place on a conditional use. Staff didn't feel that it was likely to be enough of a problem at this time. The trouble is, if the lease turns into a year after year after year and the new building's built, things could change. And when the other spaces are full up, maybe they find all the parking spaces are allocated to the other tenants, and there's nowhere for, at that point, I would think they decide they're not going to renew their lease themselves because there's no place for their customers to park. So it may be
that or the landowner gets complaints, and either way.
The parking, it's not likely to spill out onto Hazeldale Way. There really isn't designated parking that I know of on the industrial streets. So I don't know. It was the only issue that we could think of that could be a problem.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I've got a question. What kind of rules are in place if there are complaints about, lots of parking on gravel parking lots and then it being an issue, is there any rule that the city can enforce at a later time if it's not required at this time?
Yeah, especially if it's addressed in some manner like an approval with a site plan and such. That's why I was a little hesitant on the active water sports or the environmental services that we just did on approving storage yards that might actually, by their own description, be daily vehicular, and the ordinance very specifically talks about. And so that can become something that we can, it's just so much harder after the fact and after they've been operating for months or years, then we get a complaint. But that's what we try to look out for now, is would a storage yard end up having dust that blew over to the neighbors, or tracking out mud like you had indicated or something on a site. And if it's really a storage yard for layout pipes, whatever manufacturing materials that they use, they store out there, the code specifically says that's okay, but it says if it's regular vehicular maneuvering area, it should be paved. So
I think the overflow parking on this project here was gravel, so I was just bringing that up.
Yeah, and
not sure how much that's going to be used.
I mean, that's a good point, and staff thought about that as well. The fact that it's there now, it wasn't put there for this use, and it's actually a base for the future parking lot that's going to be built there, a row of parking spaces. So, it was a unique solution to helping a use go into the property because it's there today, it's not used, it's behind the facility, it's not likely because they're just pulling in and pulling back out on paved surface to cause a problem. And so therefore, we're thinking the same way you are, but we said it's only a problem until he builds the phase 2 and the gravel parking's gone. I think is more of a problem. And it's probably not going to be used that much. Their designated spaces will handle most of their parking need. So,
Any other questions? Can we hear from the applicant, please? You could state your name and address. That would be great.
Good evening. My name is Tricia Kinney, and I am owner of Canby CrossFit. My home address is 9461 South Alder Creek Lane, Canby, Oregon. And this is my husband, Dan. So we're just here for hopefully a good favor for us opening our small business in an existing space.
If I can, so
You
do I need
bet.
to?
He has the same address as me.
I have the same address, 9461 South Alder Creek Lane. My name is Dan Kinney. I have an existing business in Canby as well. I don't know if that's relevant, but I would like to, if I can, submit this into record. This is a letter from the property owner, who I believe is here as well. And the number of spaces that are allocated for Canby CrossFit per square foot is actually 6, not the 4. I don't know. That's what I don't know if I have a copy for everyone, if that's okay.
That's fine.
See that, but so obviously the parking was our issue as well. Is it going to be enough? And the good news is that if we grow, that's going to be a problem. We have a 3-year lease. The lease was brought up. We have a 3-year lease, and part of this letter is he states that during the life of the lease, he has no intention of building that second piece of property. So there will always be that overflow space available during the life of the lease. So that obviously was a concern for us too, because we don't want to get in somewhere and then what do we do now? So just addressing that.
I'd also like to reiterate what he spoke about, our classes. Typically, we have anywhere from 6 to 8 people in a class, and most of our classes will be occurring at 5 and 6 a.m. in the morning, and then again in the evenings. So we're not even going to be in the majority of, operating business hours, so parking wouldn't be an issue for us.
Any questions for Dan and Tricia?
Wonder if there would be loud music, something to wake you up that early.
This is why we can't be anywhere near residential.
Might wake me up out by the Dahlia Farm. Any questions? Thank you very much. Kathy, you're up again.
I have no comment on this one.
Okay, is there anybody else who would like to testify? Well, let this gentleman here go first. State your name and address, please.
My name is Charlie Burden, and my address is 2323 South Highway 99E, Canby, Oregon, directly just on the northwest side of the gym area there. And my question for him is, how can we keep the neighborhood, if they're going to be having noise at 5 a.m., I just want to make sure that when the rest of us are sleeping, that we can still be able to sleep without loud noise being broadcast over the neighborhood. Years ago, we had neighbors that they had a rock band, and they would be cranking things up, and it was quite a problem. So I just would, if these folks can keep the noise to an appropriate level, that's my concern. Yeah. So I live right across the street and just down the road just a little ways, and I sleep with the window open oftentimes, and would like to be able to sleep at appropriate hours.
Sure.
So.
Any questions? Thank you very much. You'll have a chance. Yes, sir. You can state your name and address again, please.
My name is Ron Reimers. I own the building at 138 Southeast Hazeldale Way, which is the building they're going to occupy. That is also my mailing address. First off, just want to address the parking issue. Per the City of Canby parking standards, we have provided 36 spots. Can I get that letter? And I ran a parking analysis today on our development. And currently, we have 2,940 square feet of office, which requires 5.88 parking spots. We have the 18,060 square feet of warehouse, which would require an additional 18. With Canby CrossFit, they'll be occupying 3,000 square feet, and at a rate of 2 per 1,000, which came from Brian today, we would require 6 spots, which would require a total spots of 29.94 spots for the full development. We currently have 36 spots, so we currently are overparked and per the standards. So I just wanted to address that we do meet your standards. There's no need for an additional. When the other building's built, the parking will be reviewed.
Very much. Any questions? Oh, are you done?
I just want to address the noise issue.
Oh, okay.
Just briefly, my understanding is we are in a manufacturing zone, and I don't know what the current decibel allowance is in the manufacturing zone, but that is enforceable. And so to address his issue, of course, we all want to be good neighbors and don't want to wake people up, but there's already an ordinance in effect for noise in the manufacturing zone. And so I think that should adequately address his concerns.
Any questions?
No.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Jules, yeah.
Dan Kinney, 9461 South Alder Creek Lane, Canby, Oregon. So I say this to my kids all the time, you can't cheat math. So I don't know the exact height of the ceilings, but they are approximately 25 feet high? 18, but, and then there's the space above. It's 3,000 square feet and it's all one long corridor. It would take approximately 3,000 watts per speaker for us to go outside of that. There's a concrete wall on one side and then a sheetrock wall on the other. I don't, not to mention the instructor also has to be able to be heard over the music, so it can't actually be loud enough to carry. So just addressing that, there wouldn't be a, I don't think that would be an issue. In fact, the other CrossFit gym that's in town now is right, the apartments are actually right across whatever that little train track is there by Fred Meyer, and it's not an issue for residents. So I think it'd be fine. Plus, if it was that loud, I don't think we would be heard over the music.
A more motley crew than...
West, certainly. At 5 o'clock in the morning, it's just sleep. So
yeah, the only noise I hear at that time of morning is my little French bulldog snoring.
My office is downtown. It will not compare anything to the train, I promise.
Yeah. Questions for Dan? No. Okay, thank you very much. Dirk, and what are your thoughts?
I think that they've got a good relationship with the owner, and I think between the owner issues.
John?
I think the issues have been addressed, that there were some concerns about, so I support this.
Andre?
No comment.
Sean?
I think it's a good fit for the building, and I'm in favor.
Yeah, I'm in favor of it.
I am as well. So I will entertain a motion to consider a request from Tricia Kenny for a conditional use permit to locate a physical fitness training business in an existing approved flex space industrial building at 138 South Hazeldale Way in the Canby Pioneer Industrial Park, CUP 18.
Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve CUP 18-05 Kenny with the one staff condition of approval.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Okay, so now we'll move on to final decisions. We'll start with the final findings for ANN
18-04 /ZC 18-05 Swelland.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We'll go to approval for DR 18-07 /CUP 18-06 Active Water Sports.
Mr. Chair, I move that we accept the final findings for DR 18-07, CUP 18-06 Active Water Sports.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We'll move on to DR 18-08 Lil Stinky Environmental.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve DR 1808 Lil Stinky Environmental for final decision with staff recommendations as well as with the parking for the service vehicles.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And then finally, the final findings for CUP-18 or CUP 18-05 Kenny.
Make a motion, we approve the final.
CUP 1805
Yes,
Kenny.
CUP 18-05 Kenny.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There we go.
I'll just, for clarification for the record, remind you that on two of those, we'll add those engineering memorandum changes to those findings.
So, Brian, any items of interest from the planning staff?
No, just, we have our next meeting is December 10th. We have 2 items on that one. They call it Alpha Sense, which is in the industrial park there, a new building operation that produces various types of insect traps and things. Very interesting business. And then we have the large North Holly annexation and rezone north of Territorial Road on that meeting. So we're furiously trying to get that prepared since the packet goes out this Friday.
And it appears that that will be the final meeting of 2018.
That's right.
Is there anybody that cannot be here for that?
I'll be
Well, I'll be here, but it'll be your final meeting.
My last meeting, yeah.
And your final meeting and Tyler's final meeting as well.
Tyler, too?
Yeah. So, just to let you guys know that we have in my formerly nicotine-stained hands, application, 7 applications for those 3 positions that Brian, Tyler Smith, and Mayor Hodson and I will be conducting these interviews as soon as we can get Mayor Hodson to.
And I'd reiterate, between the 2 of us, we need to push on it because we want to make sure that we have a full planning commission for the first meeting in January, which is the 14th.
So, Brian, just between the 2 of us then, why don't we just arbitrarily, we'll set a date and I'll push it. Can we do that, or do you want to take it, or do you want to talk to Kim tomorrow?
I don't know. I think that's probably a good idea for us to do that. You know, it's not absolutely necessary that we go through this process, but I think it's worthwhile because we've got more applicants
This is
than we have
unprecedented.
positions. Yeah, it really is.
Well, I
And
might
so-
suggest to you guys as well to definitely speak with Mayor Hodson. As obviously, we know Tyler Smith is not going to be on the council next year, so he won't be the liaison to this group anymore. So you may want to speak with Mayor Hodson of who he intends to make the liaison to this commission for next year. Might also want to be involved in those interviews.
I wonder, she might volunteer for that, Sean.
Be a former commissioner, don't you think, John?
Okay, yeah, I would think that would be advisable. Okay, so why don't you talk to Kim first, and then email, either you or Lainey can email me and let me know what she has to say about it, but I think that we have received no more applications for the position. 7 is plenty, so I'd like to get this done. And I don't know about you, but since I travel from deep in northwest Portland to come, I mean, I can leave a little bit early, but just to let you know, my best days are Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays.
Great.
So I can make myself available, but, you know, we need to get this done.
I agree.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I would like to maybe follow up on the
Troublemaker?
the best method to write up a letter to support that intersection
Oh,
improvement
yes.
to the city council.
Yeah.
How do we proceed on that?
We could
Brian?
probably attempt to draft something and pass it by you guys, send it out, see if you have any edits to it or something, and
It has to be a long letter.
Yeah.
Just a quick memo stating support, I think would be fine.
Oh, I have a question too. Remember when we had the discussion about the amendment to the plan on the duplexes? Did we ever do
Yeah,
anything on that?
Well, we actually have a solution drafted to that. However, we're convinced that it will be very controversial because our drafting fixes it. As we mentioned, we believe that state statute actually requires us to provide all types of housing. And the way our code reads right now, it doesn't really allow townhomes in Canby because it says no more than one common wall. That's what we're talking about. And if we were to propose saying that as many as 6 attached common walls, which would then allow townhomes, that's all we had to do to change it. I think the people that were opposing weren't just for that location, but maybe anywhere. And they might not like the idea that we open that up again. And that just means that we need to do a separate advertisement. It takes 35 days to DLCD to give them notice before we do a hearing. And at this point, we can do that in a couple of months. Right now, we're still completely swamped and can't keep up with what we're trying to get in front of your nose for development. And
There's 24 hours in the day, Brian.
so like I said, we've got it drafted. It's just a matter of going through the process of setting up the notice to DLCD and all of that for that one sentence change in the code. I'm thinking that that's what we need to do, separate from a whole bunch of other changes that we have fairly far along in the process too, because what happens when you put a controversial item with a whole bunch of things that are just kind of ministerial upkeep of your code, you threaten all of those with the controversial thing, and believe it or not, sometimes you focus on just 1 or 2 of 80 code changes, and then they say, well, I'm against that, so you throw the whole thing out. When all you need to do is say, everything but that can go forward. And that's how you need to think of when we do code changes. Each individual sentence in each section of the code that we're changing is its own change, and you can pick and choose which ones you think are appropriate or not, and not throw the whole thing out just because you have one item that's controversial in it. But I hesitate to put a controversial item with all these things we think are just code maintenance things that need to be changed, that we've discovered through 10 years of operating the code. But that's where we're at on that, is at any point we can do that, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be controversial.
No doubt. Okay. Did we move to adjourn already?
I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.